The clock struck midnight. In the quiet house, the only sound was the soft hum of flickering lights overhead. Emma sat on the edge of the worn sofa, her eyes darting nervously toward the dark hallway beyond the living room. The sudden creak of floorboards made her freeze. A shadow flickered, slim, elongated, sliding silently along the far wall. She blinked, and it was gone. Heart pounding, she stood and took a cautious step forward. The hallway stretched ahead, swallowed in darkness, broken only by the weak glow of the moonlight seeping through a crack in the curtains. Emma's breath hitched as the faintest whisper curled in the air, like someone calling her name from just beyond reach. She moved closer, reaching toward the spot where the shadow had vanished. But nothing was there. Behind her, the flickering lights cast eerie shapes on the ceiling. The silence shattered with a sudden slam, the front door banged shut on its own. She spun around, eyes wide, but no one was there. The house felt alive, breathing with a sinister pulse. The shadows returned. This time, a small figure darted across the hallway. Emma tried to follow, but as she moved forward, the shape melted into the darkness, leaving only a cold chill behind. Objects began to stir. A chair scraped across the wooden floor in the next room. Pictures tilted on the walls as if brushed by invisible hands. A soft, guttural whisper grew louder, filling every corner of the house. Emma called out, her voice trembling, but the only answer was the haunting echo of silence, and the relentless flicker of the lights. The night stretched endlessly, each minute heavier with dread. The shadows danced just out of reach, mocking her. The house, once a safe haven, had become a maze of fear. She wasn't alone. Something was with her, something unseen, yet unmistakably present. And with every passing moment, the dark presence grew stronger. In the hallway, the shadows waited. The old mirror hung heavy on the living room wall, its ornate frame dulled by years of neglect. At first, it was just a curious antique, a relic from another era that Emma's family barely noticed. But soon, the glass began to betray something far more sinister. One evening, as Emma passed the mirror, her reflection wavered. The image flickered like a broken film, her face warping in unnatural ways. Her eyes seemed to darken, shadows creeping beneath her skin. Behind her, vague shapes twisted and writhed, ghostly faces with hollow eyes and twisted expressions that vanished whenever she blinked. At night, the mirror's surface changed. Strange scratches appeared, fine, jagged lines etched deep into the glass, as if clawed by unseen fingers. Emma traced them with trembling fingers, feeling an icy chill creep up her arm. The mirror's reflection no longer followed reality. It showed scenes that weren't there, empty rooms filled with sorrow, dark corridors where whispers echoed, and silhouettes that reached out toward her. Each morning, the scratches multiplied. The images grew darker, more twisted. The family's own reflections began to behave independently, smiling when no one did, frowning without cause, their eyes flicking towards something beyond the glass. One afternoon, Emma's younger brother, Liam, stood frozen before the mirror, staring into it with wide, terrified eyes. "They're trying to come through," he whispered. But no one else could see what he saw, only the cold, unblinking glass. At night, the mirror pulsed with a faint, eerie glow, illuminating the room with unnatural light. Emma's mother swore she heard faint voices trapped inside the glass, crying for release. The family became prisoners of the mirror's growing power, their lives looping through terror and despair. No matter where they moved the mirror, the horrifying reflections followed. Attempts to cover or destroy it failed, the glass shattered only to reform, whole and pristine, mocking their helplessness. Trapped in a nightmare, Emma's family watched as the mirror's influence seeped into every corner of their home. The line between reflection and reality blurred, and with every glance, the shadows in the glass crept closer, ready to pull them into the darkness forever. The moment Emma stepped into the room at the end of the hallway, a wave of cold slammed into her like a physical force. The air was frigid, so cold that her breath hung in the air like pale mist, and the hairs on her arms stood on end. The old wooden floorboards creaked beneath her feet, but even their sound seemed swallowed by an oppressive silence that filled the space. The walls, once painted a soft cream, were now shadowed and gray, their surfaces seeming to absorb every flicker of light. An invisible weight pressed down, heavy and suffocating. The room felt wrong. Not just cold, but filled with something ancient and restless. As Emma's eyes adjusted, she caught movement, faint flickers at the edge of her vision. Shapes appeared and vanished, translucent figures drifting slowly across the room like drifting smoke. They were faint, almost human, faces twisted in sorrow and pain, eyes hollow and pleading. A soft, agonized moan echoed through the cold air, coming from everywhere and nowhere all at once. Emma's heart hammered in her chest, but she forced herself to stay. She needed to understand. Slowly, she reached out, whispering into the stillness, "Why are you here? What do you want?" For a moment, nothing but the chill responded. Then, the temperature dropped further, and a figure coalesced before her, a woman, pale and translucent, tears streaming down her ghostly face. The apparition's lips moved in a silent plea. Emma felt the despair pressing on her chest, a sorrow so profound it threatened to crush her. The spirits had been trapped here, bound by unfinished pain, longing for release or justice. Frantically, Emma searched the room for clues, old photographs, dusty journals, forgotten relics. A faded letter, half-burned and fragile, spoke of betrayal and loss, hinting at the spirit's tragic past. The air pulsed with energy, the spirit's cries rising in a haunting chorus as Emma promised to help. Time seemed to blur as she struggled to communicate, desperate to free the trapped souls before the cold claimed her too. Outside, the rest of the house lay silent, unaware of the chilling presence that had gathered in the cold room, where the spirits waited, restless and yearning for peace. The old oak table sat in the center of the dimly lit living room, surrounded by Emma and her family. Flickering candles cast tall, dancing shadows against peeling wallpaper, painting the room with an eerie glow. The air was thick with tension, the heavy scent of burning wax mixed with the cold, metallic taste of fear. Their hands joined, fingertips barely touching, forming a fragile circle of hope. The ancient Ouija board lay before them, its worn letters faded but still visible in the candlelight. The clock's hands crept toward midnight, the hour when the veil between worlds thinned. "Is anyone here with us?" Emma whispered, her voice trembling. The planchette hovered, then slowly slid toward the letters, Y. E. S. A chill swept through the room as the temperature plummeted. The candles flickered violently, threatening to snuff out the fragile light. Whispered voices swirled, ghostly and distant at first, then growing louder, more urgent. The family's eyes widened as the spirits began to speak, revealing shattered lives and untold suffering. They told of betrayal, of love lost to cruelty, and a demand for justice that echoed across the years. The séance spiraled deeper. Shadows lengthened and twisted into ghostly forms that pressed against the edges of reality. The boundary between the living and the dead thinned, and for a moment, it seemed the spirits might reach through the veil and claim them. Emma's mother gasped as the room spun, her grip faltering. The planchette raced across the board, spelling out warnings: leave. Before. Too late. But it was too late. The spirits' cries filled the room, a cacophony of sorrow and rage. The family huddled together, their fear a shield against the encroaching darkness. In that midnight hour, the house became a battlefield between two worlds, the living clinging to hope, the dead demanding justice. As dawn approached, the séance ended abruptly, leaving behind silence and a lingering sense of dread. The family was left to wonder, had they driven the spirits away, or merely invited them deeper inside? The line between here and beyond had blurred. And now, nothing would ever be the same. The house trembled beneath their feet as the first cold gust of dawn whispered through the cracked windows. Emma stood at the center of the room, clutching the ancient talisman tightly in her palm. Around her, the family formed a circle, candles flickering wildly, their flames battling the thick shadows that pulsed like living things on the walls. The nights of terror had left them drained, haunted eyes, trembling hands, but this was their last chance. The final ritual. The key to reclaiming their home from the darkness that had taken root. A low growl echoed from the corners of the room, a guttural sound that seemed to crawl under their skin. Suddenly, the air thickened, charged with furious energy. Objects lifted, chairs, picture frames, even books, hurled through the air like missiles. The family's voices wavered but did not break as they began the incantation, their words trembling but determined. Outside, the first rays of sunlight began to push back the night, filtering weakly through the grimy windows. But inside, the spirits fought with terrifying power. Shadows twisted into monstrous shapes, their forms writhing and snarling, desperate to hold their grip on the house. Emma's mother screamed as a heavy wooden beam crashed near her feet. The room shook violently, dust and debris falling like rain. The family's hearts pounded in unison, a drumbeat of fear and hope. "Hold on!" Emma shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. She stepped forward, raising the talisman high as it began to glow, a radiant light pushing against the darkness. The shadows hissed, recoiling from the brightness, but their resistance grew stronger, claws reaching, voices screaming in rage. Time seemed to slow as the dawn's light seeped further inside, breaking through cracks in the walls and floorboards. The spirits' anguished cries faded into desperate whispers. With one final surge, Emma shouted the last words of the ritual. The house shook one last time, then fell deathly silent. The heavy shadows dissolved, retreating into nothingness as the golden light of morning bathed the room. The air cleared, warmth returning to the walls. The family stood breathless, eyes wide, finally free. The nightmare was over. Or so they hoped.